What's up, government class? Welcome back. We're still talking about local government today, state and local government. We're going to be talking about two elements of local government. Today, we're going to talk about the concept or the role of an alderman, and then we're going to look at the county clerk. So I know that talking about the county clerk might not sound that exciting, but um, our local government is such a big part of how we function as Savannians. So I think it's important that we look at we sort of look behind the curtain and see how it operates. So let's get going. What does an alderman do? Did you know if you're frustrated with something going on in your community, your dentist could potentially help change the law to rectify it? Or perhaps even your teacher or the guy wrenching on cars down at the local garage? It's because one of those people could be your alderman. I am a teacher, I'm not an alderman. To understand what an alderman is, you first need to determine what government you're talking about. We're, of course, talking about the United States, the Georgia government. Aldermen were traditionally high ranking officials in Anglo Saxon England, often presiding in a shire. The term alderman comes from the Old English title of ealdorman, which means elder man or older man. That's on your summary assignment for today. I say alderman comes from which Old English title? And you're going to tell me ealdorman. In the United States, city and county governments prefer the term councilman or council member to alderman, but it depends on the municipality. Chicago's city council, for instance, is made up of 50 elected aldermen who represent a district or a ward. Savannah is a city that uses the term alderman. Um, but most cities, I know in Atlanta, in Brunswick and Noonan, other areas I've lived, it's always been a city council person. And we're going to look later at the alderman districts in Savannah. Chicago's is particularly famous for having aldermen a lot of times because they're super corrupt up there. But we're going to take a look at Savannah's, of course. The city's mayor presides over the aldermen who represent the people at a city or county level. Aldermen are elected by the residents of a district. Much like congressmen, aldermen represent the people who elected them and aim to do what is in the residents' best interest. In some cases, a district could have more than one alderman if the district was particularly large. So, like a congressman or a congresswoman, the alderman is elected by the people of a certain district. So he or she is going to lobby on behalf of that district and try to promote policy decisions at the mayoral level that benefit his or her district. In other countries, aldermen are more prevalent. For instance, in England and Ireland, aldermen serve on a council that represents boroughs much the way the council members represent counties. Like most politicians, aldermen can be from different political parties. In England, for example, aldermen can be from the Labour, Conservative, Green, Socialist, Alternative, Respect, and Liberal Democratic parties, or the Christian People's Alliance. Same goes for the United States, of course. You can be Republican, Democrat, Independent. And remember from the very beginning of the year, our very first unit was Foundations of American Democracy. And we got a lot of our government, the precedent that we use to conduct government in the United States, we got a lot of that from England, right? They were the mother country for some time, for several hundred years. So that's pretty much what an alderman is. Let's look at what they do. And of course, the responsibilities of an alderman are going to vary depending on the district he or she is representing. Aldermen have several responsibilities depending on the municipality. And guys, municipality, um, for our purposes, just think city. Just depending on the city, aldermen meet with fellow council members monthly, twice a month, or even weekly. They might also serve in emergency situations to work through issues pertaining to the area that they represent. Aldermen adhere to a scheduled list of items known as an agenda, but can deal with matters that arise quickly and without warning. The agenda is often posted before the meetings, which are usually open to the public. We'll, after we go through these notes, if we have time, we'll check out a recording of a Savannah City Council meeting. It's interesting. It can be. In addition to working with fellow aldermen to hash out issues, including zoning and other matters of city policy, aldermen often serve on committees that work on larger projects. For instance, let's say someone brought up the idea to build a youth center in your community. The first step in the process before ever breaking ground on the project would be to form a group to design a plan. Aldermen are appointed to each of these committees, and they might do research on related issues, talk to representatives from other cities that have done similar projects before, and they might discuss concerns with residents who would be affected by the construction of this hypothetical youth center. In the US, an alderman's job can range from a part time position earning less than $10,000 a year to a full time job earning as much as $100,000. And that's, for example, that would be a huge metropolis like Chicago, Illinois. They don't make 100 grand in Savannah. Just about anyone can run for election and be an alderman, though circumstances such as felony convictions may keep candidates off the ballot. Each district has guidelines residents must meet to be considered viable candidates. These guidelines are often set by a board of elections or electoral commission to ensure candidates' integrity and to investigate possible conflicts of interest. This is where things can get a little interesting. So imagine if a city council employee, like the person that checks your water usage, is also an alderman. And that person introduces a recommendation to give pay raises to meter readers, right? So that's an example, and that's a very obvious example. But when someone is both working as a private civilian and helping to make uh, policies at the local government level, it can get tricky. And some aldermen have gotten themselves in trouble for crafting policies that benefit some business interests they have outside of politics. A lot of times it's contracts for development. Since aldermen are residents in communities and many times are only part time city employees once elected, a potential candidate must be able to balance his or her time. While there is usually no prescribed number of hours required of aldermen, it's not uncommon to spend 20 or more hours in service per week. Also, aldermen can be required to be on call 24 hours a day. Some well known cities in the U.S. that have aldermen, in addition to Savannah, of course, the top city, St. Louis, Milwaukee, New Haven, Connecticut, and Chicago. There are places in Australia and other European nations that still use the alderman system as well. County clerk. I know when you woke up this morning, you thought to yourself, quarantine's getting a little old. My siblings are getting on my nerves. You know what would make it all better? Is if I get to learn about a county clerk. Well, kids, your dream has come true. Let's figure out what they do, shall we? If you've ever wanted to fill an elected civil service position bursting at the seams with responsibility, consider working as a county clerk. Has anybody been seeking out a position bursting at the seams with responsibility? If I asked that in class, I don't think too many hands would be raised. But if you did raise your hand, county clerk's where it's at. So let's find out what you're going to be doing when you take that job. You'll be responsible for filing vital records or important documents related to a specific county's population, including birth, death, and marriage certificates. Depending on the size of the population, the duties of the job can go a lot further than that. In countries with smaller populations, the clerk wears a number of different hats. It's one of those rare positions which the more customers you have, the fewer responsibilities you hold. Right? That sounds counterintuitive. So, sticking with the Illinois example, let's look at Cook County. Cook County is where Chicago is, and a lot of people live there. It's like 5.3 million people. Every time a Cook County resident is born, dies, marries, forms a domestic partnership, or divorces, the clerk accepts and files the certifying legal document. Each of these is added to the millions of records that the Cook County clerk must maintain. So, a lot of counties, of course, are going to be much, much smaller than that. But um, you can see that'd be a handful. That is a lot of records to file and keep track of. So, in that county, for example, it's only the clerk is only responsible for those things: birth, death, marriage, domestic partnerships, divorces. So, New Jersey, let's look up there. Um, they have the county seat of Hackensack. And you guys hopefully will be going up not to New Jersey, but to New York pretty soon. But who knows? I hope you guys get a chance to go up there and explore. Those of you that were signed up for that. Bergen County had less than 900,000 people in 2008. So, unlike Cook County, Illinois, where there's 5.3 million, in Bergen, the clerk does more than that. He would have additional responsibilities. The clerk's office also files and processes residents' passport applications. And property deeds, issues county IDs, gives and files licenses for local doctors and business owners. Residents seeking U.S. naturalization file an application at the clerk's office. So a lot of these processes, these government processes, they run through the clerk. So Bergen County is pretty typical. We'll use that as our example for Savannah. So the state of Texas requires its county clerks to oversee local elections. In San Juan, New Mexico, they're responsible for compiling minutes of the official meetings of the local board of commissioners. Some county clerks also serve as the clerk of courts for the county probate judge. Um, like we talked about on Monday, the state court system is incredibly complex. So we didn't even mention the role of the clerk, but that means they're responsible for compiling and maintaining the paperwork for each case the judge hears. Whether the county clerk stays busy through the sheer volume of records or the addition of extra responsibilities, his or her office is often underfunded and understaffed. Kathy Michael, clerk from McLean County, Illinois, says that managers in the private sector are, quote, often flabbergasted by the complexity of the challenge and the very limited resources the clerk has at hand to meet the challenge. She goes on to say it must be done for our community to operate smoothly. The county assessor. So in the 80s, Japan had a huge boom in real estate. Prices rose up. The value of land exploded. At one point in 1989, the value of the grounds at the Japanese Imperial Palace was more than all of the real estate in California. The assessors in each of California's 58 counties at the time are unsung heroes of that little tale. Without them, we wouldn't have the data that was compiled to find the total value of California's real estate. That's because county assessors in the United States are responsible for valuing every single piece of property in their counties. Every few years, usually 3, assessors estimate the value of each parcel of real property, with the general exception of schools, churches, and charities in the county. Real property is the combination of land and any structures on it. So, like the lot and the home that you live in on the lot. Every vacant lot, apartment complex, strip mall, and home has a value. The assessor estimates that value based on the current real estate. In between these 3-year pushes, the assessor identifies overlooked properties and locates and contacts the owners. The assessor also creates value assessments for new construction and determines whether any reassessment is in order when a property changes ownership. So, property value, you'll hear, since SCAD came in and bought up, all the rundown buildings and built it up, home values downtown have skyrocketed. So when that's the case, the assessor, let's say your place costs $200,000, but then there's some huge development and all this economic activity is coming to Savannah. Now your home's worth $300,000. Well, that price, that estimated price, that home value, that's being calculated by the assessor. The assessor compiles all of these property values into an assessment roll, which is a master list of the value of all the real property in a given county or jurisdiction. The value estimates created by assessors take a number of factors into account in addition to market values. For example, a new shed constructed in a homeowner's backyard will likely increase the value of the real property the year after it's built. Over time, however, the added value that shed brought to the property will decline as the shed ages and deteriorates. There are two ways assessors can approach valuing real property. The first is the sales approach, basing the value on the sale price of similar structures and properties in the in the area that have been sold recently. There's also the cost approach, which uses as a basis the cost of building a new similar structure on a similar piece of property and deducting any age or condition related depreciation. So why such a uh, incredibly tedious job? Like why would they create a job that requires that kind of work? It's all about taxes. The point in creating the property value estimated by the assessor is to determine how much tax to levy against the property owner. Property taxes are usually of vital importance for the local government's budget, and they pay for services like schools, law enforcement, fire, and ambulance services and parks. So that's one reason, guys, that poor neighborhoods tend to have bad schools because it's property taxes paying for the schools. And if the property taxes are really low, then those funds that are being brought in to fund the school district are going to be insufficient. The most commonly skip one. No, I didn't. The most commonly used system of taxing is the rate system. On sales tax, for example, the state collects an established stable rate per dollar. So a $1 candy bar actually costs $1.07 in a state where the sales tax is 7%. The fluctuating amount of the state collects through the sales tax depends on the dollar value of goods sold in the state that year. That's not the case with property taxes, which is a budget based system of taxation. Under this system, legislators determine how much money their county will need to pay for the services that municipalities use property taxes to cover. When the legislators determine how much money will be needed, it's up to the tax assessor to divide the amount among the tax base. In that case, the property owners in the county. So the tax levied against real property is a percentage of the total tax amount legislators collect. So while the values of homes and businesses may change, the amount the county collects doesn't actually fluctuate based on those values. The property tax a homeowner pays does. When property owners have paid the tax, the sum should equal the amount the legislators decreed should be levied against the county as a whole. Usually, the property tax is expressed in dollar amount per $100,000 of a property's value. So, if the tax is $1 per hundred of value, the property tax levied against a home valued at 108,000 would be 1,080. So you can see how fairness and accuracy are a big part of a county assessor's job. An overvalued home means property owner will pay more than he or she really owes. Undervaluing a property means the county could fall short in its revenue projections. I think with that, we're going to stop for the day. You guys do have a short assignment. It's like 3 questions from today's lesson. So, good job, guys. You're on the home stretch. Keep on crushing it.